First, I want to thank the World Affairs Council for organizing this lunch. It's great to see so many friends and partners in this room. And also I want to introduce my wife, Rosa. Please get up. I'm pleased to announce that today is our anniversary. Actually, I'll trick you because in our marriage, every day is an anniversary. It's great to be here in Dallas. And like I said in the reception earlier, there's so many friendly people. It's one of the friendliest states in the United States. And at first, before I came here, I thought the reason why everyone is friendly is because everyone's carrying a gun. I would be friendly to people who carry a gun. But apparently, everyone's friendly because everyone is friendly. And it's part of your DNA, it's part of your culture. And it's always a pleasure to be in Dallas. I came here about 2.5 years ago. I'm completing my 3rd year as ambassador. And I did my high school here. I studied at McLean High School in Virginia. Great time. It was I studied there from 1979 to 81. And I miss it, especially miss I had my own bully. And ever since becoming ambassador, I've been back to McLean, to every gas station, hoping to find him. Actually, correction, hoping to find her. I just arrived here from Washington, D.C., and before that we just concluded a very robust U.S.-Indonesia security dialogue in Jakarta. And everyone in Jakarta asked me this one question: what is sequestration? It's tough for me to explain, and to be honest, before I came to the United States, it's not a term that I used to hear very often, but that's part of the dialogue was explaining what that is to my Indonesian friends. But look, I'm very happy to be here. Today I want to talk about Indonesia, and I want to talk also about how Indonesia is playing a role in the region and how that connects to America's rebalancing or pivot towards Asia. But first we can talk about Indonesia. Indonesia, let me give you the assets that we have. Indonesia, for those who are wondering how Indonesia is relevant, Indonesia is the 4th largest country in the world. We are 250 million people. We are, I think, the next largest country after the United States. We are the 3rd largest democracy in the world. We are the next largest democracy after the United States in the world. We are also the country with the largest Muslim population. There are more Muslims in Indonesia than in the entire Middle East. And Indonesia's Muslims are very unique because it's very moderate and tolerant Islam that we embrace. It would surprise you, for example, that in Indonesia we have a national holiday for Christmas and Easter. Why? Because Christianity is a state religion in Indonesia, a country with the largest Muslim population. It would surprise you that in Indonesia there are more churches in Indonesia than in Great Britain or than in Germany. There are 64,000 churches in Indonesia. I think in Great Britain it's about 54, and in Germany it's around that number. Right. So it is a country that is built on the foundations of diversity and pluralism. This is at the soul of Indonesian nationhood. Multiculturalism is very much what we are all about. Right? So Indonesia prides itself on its model of unity in diversity. Indonesia is also the largest economy in Southeast Asia, and we have the largest middle class in Southeast Asia. And it will surprise you as it did me last year, that we are the second highest growing country in Asia after China last year. So we grew even higher than India. We grew at about 6.3% last year, and we expect this trajectory upward to continue. We also have developed a new mindset about how we see ourselves and our place in the world. In the past, when I studied in college, my professors used to refer to Indonesia as a third world country. And I didn't like that very much because it's as if you're on a train, there's a first class passenger, there's a second class passenger, and then there's a third class passenger, and we were the third class passenger. So we used that term, but we were never very comfortable about it, and we haven't used that term anymore. Now we use the term emerging economy, which is much more respectable and much more reflects what Indonesia is all about. Indonesia is now also a member of the G20, just like the United States, which means that unlike in the past where we see the G7 having this exclusive group between America, Europe, and Japan making economic decisions for the world, now Indonesia is inside part of the larger group of emerging economies and developed countries making or shaping international economic decision making. Indonesia also has this distinction of what American embassy, U.S. embassy in Jakarta calls an environmental superpower, because we have tremendous amount of biodiversity at sea. We have what is called the Amazons of the sea in our coral triangle in our oceans, and also we have one of the largest tracts of tropical rainforests in the world. The air that we're breathing now, actually, a lot of it comes from Indonesia free of charge. So that's the significance of Indonesia, and we built our international engagement based on these assets. But one of the most important story about Indonesia is how we have evolved into the third largest democracy. Not just any democracy, but a functioning democracy. We were the last country to join the third wave of democratic transitions in the 20th century. We became a democracy in 1999 when we had our first elections after decades of authoritarian rule. And I would like to think that with what is going on in the Arab Spring countries now, that Indonesia offers a lot of useful lessons. I say to my counterpart from the Middle East that I hope Arab Spring can become Indonesian summer, because a lot of things that are happening in the Middle East now is something that we had experienced before. But what we did in our democratic transitions in the last 12 years or so is that we have broken a lot of myths about democracy. And I should tell you that the reason why we took so long to become a democracy, 3 decades or 5 decades or more, is because there were a lot of myths about democracy that scared us. Right? It scared me. I wanted the best for my country. I was young, but I was told that there are a lot of things that we did not want by going into a democratic country. And fortunately, in the last 12 years, we have broken these myths. What are these myths? Let me go through them very quickly. One is the myth that democracy and development are mutually exclusive, that they can't go together. In Asia, when I was a student, they said that you can't have both. You can either have a lot of democracy, but no economic growth, or a lot of economic growth and suppressed freedom, little democracy. And this is what the debate in Asian values was all about. And this is the reason why many Asian countries suppress political freedom and had little democracy, because they justified it by saying we needed that in order to achieve high economic growth, which is what happened in Indonesia. And throughout Asia, there was a time when Japan was the only democratic country, and Japan felt alone, as Prime Minister Nakasone used to say, because if they look around the region, there were only very, very few democracies other than Japan. But we proved that wrong, because we have proved, after only about 3 or 4 years, Indonesia has a very robust democracy with periodic elections, and at the same time, one of the highest growth economies among the G20s and in Asia. So we got both democracy and development together, and we did not have to choose, and we broke that myth. The second myth was democracy, Islam, and modernity cannot go together. We broke that, right? I admit, in 1999, when we had our first elections, I was a bit worried, well, now we have a lot of Islamic parties, dozens of them. Before, they had only one Islamic party. And where is this going? Is Indonesia going to be an Islamic state, right? But after 3 elections, 1999, 2004, and 2009, the Islamic parties together cannot gather more than 15% of the national votes, right? And in fact, what has happened is Islamic parties in Indonesia has become the most vocal proponent of democracy, right? And this is one of the best surprise about Indonesia's democratic development. So we have achieved a condition whereby democracy has grown, Islamic parties have grown, but they have become very staunch proponents of democracy and modernity as well. And the surprising thing is all this happened without violence, without bloodshed, without much soul-searching debate. Why is this important? It's important because when I went to the Middle East, it opened my eyes. I went to my first Middle Eastern trip in 2005, and I saw very little countries had what was called 3-in-1. 3-in-1 was this democracy, Islam, and modernity. What countries were Islamic in the Middle East? Almost all of them. Yeah? So that's one. Everybody had it. But when you ask what countries were Islamic and modern, right, then the numbers go down by half or even more. But when you ask in 2005 what countries were Islamic, modern, and democratic, it went down almost down to 0, right? And I can't really explain why it was so hard in the Middle East, but in Indonesia, all this were achieved effortlessly, without much soul-searching debate. So we proved that it can be done in Indonesia, the country with the largest Muslim population. The third myth that we broke was democracy would break up the country. And this is what they said to us in government. Look at Soviet Union. Look at Yugoslavia. The moment they opened up, the country broke apart like into pieces. And they said that Indonesia would be the next Balkan. And it scared us. Right? But what happened was completely the opposite. After we became a democracy, yes, Timor-Leste separated from Indonesia, but the rest of Indonesia got together and achieved stronger national unity. We had a very strong separatist conflict in Aceh, going for 3 decades. It was resolved peacefully. And we have proved that democracy has made Indonesia even stronger. National unity was achieved at a higher level. The fourth myth was this. They said, we can't become a democracy because we didn't have a middle class. Right? Look at America. America is a middle class democracy. You need a middle class to grow a democracy. Textbooks, yes, probably true. But in reality, no. We proved that even with the absence of a large middle class in 1999, right, we could grow democracy. In fact, even people in the rural village, the poor people, the farmers, the people with the economically, weak, were the strongest proponent of democracy. Because this is a time when they vote, they actually feel powerful. They actually feel that they have ownership of the system and of the future. So we proved, although now we have the largest middle class in Southeast Asia, but when we began our democratic transitions, we proved that the presence of a large middle class was not necessary to grow a democracy. And we also proved that we can achieve both democracy and security. When we began our democratic transition, this was around 2001, things began to change after 9/11. Right? There was a lot of debate in Indonesia. Look, we got to pull back on human rights. We got to pull back on freedom. We got to pull back on democracy. Because Indonesia, we had our own terrorist attacks in 2002 and 2003, and we had these small groups of very radical people who wanted to create Islamic State and so on and so on. It was very difficult political debate in Indonesia, but we came with the firm decision that our democracy cannot be compromised. There was no restrictions on political freedoms. If we were to suffer a little bit because of it, we would take that. Because if you start compromising on our democracy, and it's a young thing, then the impact for the long term would be greater. So what we did was we did not compromise, and as a result, now Indonesia has a very strong democracy and has one of the strongest records of counterterrorism and strong conditions of national security. So these are the things, these are the myths that we broke in Indonesia through our democratic transitions. And I think Indonesia's experiment is quite important because, look, Indonesia is one of the most multi-ethnic, one of the most diverse multi-ethnic nations in the world. You know, we have hundreds of ethnic groups. We have, like America, you know, brown people, white people, yellow people, green people, pink people. You know, we have 5 major religions, state religions in Indonesia. And Indonesia is a great experiment of how such a diverse country, ethnically and religiously, can work together in a non-Western world. In the Western world, you have America as the example. But in the non-Western world, you know, it's been a tough fight. You know, Malaysia broke up with Malaysia broke up with Chinese Singapore. Right? In India, after independence, Pakistan broke away in a very violent war. And in parts of you know, the developing world, these questions are always asked: can diversity and pluralism work together in democracy in non-Western world? And Indonesia's experiment has shown that we can. And we don't say that we've been all successful. We have a lot of challenges, but so far we've been quite blessed to be where we are today. Now, Indonesia is the largest country in Southeast Asia, and I think this is relevant for the United States as you now proceed with your pivot or rebalancing policy. Indonesia welcomes the rebalancing of the United States to Asia, and we think that as the United States, we think it's timely for the United States to rebalance because the region itself has become very, very different, even to us in Indonesia. You know, even Asia is discovering Asia. You know, even Asia is discovering Asia, and we're talking about a region which has centuries full of relationships. Indonesia has recently discovered China, right? What does that mean? Well, before that, our trade with China was minimal, almost non-existent, and the top 3 trading partner was United States, Japan, and Europe. And we have discovered China. Now our trade with China is $56 billion, twice our trade with the United States, right? A lot of our students are discovering India. A lot of our students are flocking, tourists are flocking to Malaysia and Australia. A lot of Japanese companies and Japanese Indonesian companies are working together, and so on and so on. But Asia is discovering Asia. And I know there are American friends who said to me, look, we never left Asia. We never left Asia. We've always been there. So what is this rebalancing? You're right. But the fact is, Asia has gone much faster than before. Right? In the last 10 years or so, Asia has moved at a speed which it had never known before, diplomatically and politically. Right? The number of democracies in Asia now is at its highest ever. Now, what does that mean? That means that America did not go slower, but Asia got a lot faster. And America, like the rest of Asia, need to readjust itself to that new speed and earn its place in that new Asia as well. You know, 3 decades ago, I would gladly say that America was the only game in town, right? I mean, you know, China was busy with China in the 70s. India was close, was very inward looking. And ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, was did not have a sense of regionalism the way that it has now, right? So America was really the only game in town. And Japan was quite reliant on the United States. But what is different now is that with the power shifts going on, there's a lot more game in town. A lot more game. China is game, right? India is game, right? ASEAN is game, now that ASEAN has become a community. South Korea is game, right? So there's a lot more game in town. And we need to get used to that, the countries in the region, the emerging powers, the regional countries, and America also needs to get used to that. I think one of the things that is needed in Asia Pacific is what we call strategic trust. Right? This is our countries scrambling to redefine their relations and build the new architecture for Asia Pacific. Strategic trust is something that remains a challenge. You got good relationships now. The American relationship with Vietnam is one of the best transformational relationship and inspiring to us in the region. How can two countries that had very difficult pasts create this great economic and military cooperation? That is something that we all see and we admire. But throughout Asia Pacific, there are still pockets of strategic mistrust. Between the North and South Korea, between China and Japan, India and Pakistan, and so on and so on. I think the challenge in the near future is how do we overcome these strategic, the question of strategic mistrust and transform them into a question of strategic trust. And one phenomenon that I see in Asia that is quite different, and what I noticed in my 24 years in foreign ministry, is the phenomenon of new diplomatic partnerships. I would argue that now partnerships will be more important than alliances. I don't know if, hopefully that's not too controversial a statement to make, but what I mean by this is this. Indonesia, 6 years ago, we did not have diplomatic partnership or strategic partnerships. But now we have about a dozen, including with all the major powers, including with the United States, including with China, including with Russia, including with Japan. And Indonesia is not the only one who are emerging with these strategic partnerships. Our friends around the region, China included, Korea included, India included, they all are developing their strategic partnerships. And by doing so, they're creating new strategic, economic, and diplomatic spaces around the region. And this is important because Asia Pacific used to be known as a condensed region. That there's not much that you do to expand relations, but that has somehow been broken with the power shifts that are going on and the rise of emerging powers. And among these emerging powers, you begin to see new diplomatic partnerships. And this is why I'm glad that the U.S. rebalancing towards Asia Pacific recognized that it's not just maintaining alliances. It's very important, of course, from your perspective to maintain alliances. But beyond that, with countries that you cannot have alliance with, such as Indonesia, we cannot have an alliance with any country, not the United States, not China, and so on. But with countries that you can't have alliances, you have to engage into new diplomatic partnerships. So maybe that's my cue. But again, I think the challenge for the United States is to reclaim the space in Asia.